Welcome back to another session on Innovation Alley at EduTech 2020, a fully virtual EdTech conference.
Started at the university where I was teaching first year accounting and essentially looking for a way to improve the performance and success rate for students.
How could we make it so that every student could be a mentor, every student could tutor somebody else? What's the technology piece missing there to make that work at scale?
Realistically, AI is such a powerful tool or mechanism that it can be deployed to solve so many different problems.
I wouldn't wish raising capital on my worst enemy. It's tough. It's no. We love your idea, but not yet. Come back in 12 months.
There's been a huge acceleration in the investment in EdTech at a global level.
There is still a role for government, there is a role for large education providers, there is a role for large education systems to play in that ideation space and the innovation space.
My name's Mark. I'm founder / CEO / whatever I need to be at this certain point in time of Xplor. And Xplor is a education platform that manages all the administration of a childcare centre. So that's everything from billing to reporting to parents, government integration, so the fees they get to support their children through early years. And then we also work with educators so they can document a child's learning, share important information about their child's day to the parents. And then finally we work with the parents that allows them to view that information and get involved ultimately at home with their child's learning so they can continue that development in the home. The inspiration, I guess, to start Xplor was really simple. I used to run childcare centres with my mum, and before that I was actually in the Defence Force, I was in the Army. So my background in education was solely going to school. But when I left the Defence Force to help my mum in her childcare centre, she's a super passionate teacher. But what was quickly realised is when she bought a childcare centre, the majority of her time was spent doing administration, the stuff that I don't think any teacher really signs up for. And it's a fascinating sector that most teachers, well, all teachers start doing their role, so they're on the floor teaching, and then their career transitions and they end up in an office, where most other careers you start in the office and you work the other way. So it's just a fascinating sector to watch. But anyway, I got super excited about learning and watching children develop in like 0 to 5-year-olds. And then quickly realised that majority of time these passionate educators were spending doing administration. So my excitement for education is if I can at least try and support them and our teams can remove that administration, at least they can teach. And that's sort of the way we give back to education. So it was a very long-winded way of getting into the space, but it was just done to solve a problem for my mum. And selfishly for myself, because I was the one having to do this administration. Technology can do those sort of low-level tasks quite well, which means those really important, those super creative roles like teaching and educating, people can actually do, not sidetracked or bogged down with admin. Any startup, they never do it for the money or they're never chasing the money. What we were doing was, how do we connect families with their children? So really exciting. We started this thing to connect families with parents. Every single day we see children learning. We get excited when we see educators coming up with new ways of using the platform to help children learn. So little things that now educators physically film children on the platform and the children tell the parents what they did that day. And it's really cool. And one service actually had one child holding a device, the other child standing, and it was like this interview of what did you do today. In the past that was done with someone writing a long document that parents may or may not read. When you've got a child telling you what you do, it's really cool. So it's great to see that connection with families and children happening, and it's something that we always really wanted to deliver, a deeper connection to parents to help them with learning. I guess the key challenges with any sort of startup, and I try not to use that word, but any startup is that capital raising and then trying to figure out when to do it and how quickly you should do it, and then how much you should be raising, and then how you're going to use that investment to drive growth. And then second to that is the challenges of just normal scale, so the teams and what those people look like within the teams and how you develop your teams, help them learn, keep them in the company without trying to look for other opportunities out there, and it's just endless. Someone actually described it to me quite well that a startup's very much like an ER ward. So you walk through the front doors and you have no idea what's going to happen. There's always something on fire or something that's going to happen. And as soon as you think you're leaving for that evening or everything's calm, there's a phone call. So there's challenges every single day, but I was reflecting on this morning, and you wouldn't change it. So it's just one of those things that you deal with, but you've got great people around you to do it, and that's what we do every single day. We're 4 years old. The first year we're focused on raising capital and building a product, selling that product, and just getting it into market, and that's a really big task. The fourth year now we're looking at going back and fixing or improving those processes that we didn't have in place when we were doing those things, which is better process for the team, helping that team with professional development and learning, and then that constant customer support and making that customer experience better.
Welcome to this session on the Innovation Channel at EduTech 2020, which the year is just moving so incredibly quickly. We've got a fantastic conversation that we're going to have now with one of Australia's leading EdTech entrepreneurs, Mark Woodland, who founded Xplor really from a personal journey, part of his personal journey. So let's welcome Mark now. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Why don't we start by getting you to give us a bit of a background to Xplor and how that came about and what problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I'll keep it as short as I can. The story of how we started is with my mother. She was a school teacher her whole life, and eventually retired at the end of her career and opened up a small childcare centre here in Melbourne. And solely with the intent that she would be able to teach and mould and support children and families through education. Quickly realizing that as she started that journey, the majority of her time was spent doing administration, collecting fees, running a business. And she was getting less and less time spent with children and families. This was in 2010 when I was in the army, and I was listening to my mum complain sort of each afternoon about some of the challenges she would have. So I left the army to help her run the administration element of the childcare centre, which was my first taste of what education was. And it was a quick realization that there was a lot of administration, all for the right reasons, but either way, there was a lot of administration that had to be managed. And I was just getting quite fed up with that. So I went looking for some software to try and support us to do that, quickly realized that there wasn't any in the market that could help. So we built our own. And from 2010 to 2016, we kept building the software, we kept building it out, giving it more functionality, kept growing our childcare centres.
Before you started the building the software though, Mark, how long had you been running the childcare centre?
Yeah, so from 2010 to 2016, we were running childcare centres, so about 6 years, and we kept opening up childcare centres through that process.
Okay.
So in total, we had 3 childcare centres by the end of 2016. By the end of 2015 and the beginning of 2016, we sold those childcare centres because we kept getting more interest about the software and what it was doing. So in 2016, the platform or the brand Xplor was born, and from there we had some venture capital come in the terms of Airtree and invest and supercharge that growth. So that's sort of how it all started. So what was a very small problem in a very small childcare centre here turned out to be a problem that everyone was facing, not only here, but around the world.
But that's a really important thing that I wanted to sort of talk about and think about, this idea of your personal experience and understanding intimately what the problem you were trying to face. The problem you're trying to solve. Was that useful as you built your product?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly useful, and it still is useful today, 10 years down the track. And it's that deep understanding of what the customer needs based on the problem they're trying to solve. And by physically running childcare centres, working with parents and families, working with educators, you get a deep understanding of what actually happens inside a childcare centre. And I think that's the gap that a lot of and I say this with myself included, you know, a lot of ed tech companies have, is we all want to make education better, but we may not know, you know, what are some of those issues that need to be solved, because I don't think anyone wants to replace teachers. We certainly do not. Our goal is to be a tool to support teachers. So you need to deeply understand the problems that they're trying to solve, because your job is just the support.
Okay. And having that intimate knowledge, right, and understanding intimately what the problems were, did that mean you end up building a product for yourself, or you built a product for the sector?
Yeah, well, I never started to build a product for anyone else, as selfish as it sounds, except myself, because I was frustrated with the job I was having to do with administration. So building it for anyone else outside myself was never the reason it was started. It was solely just to help my mother as a teacher. How do I solve those problems so she could focus on teaching? That is it. Other problems came later. There's sort of three stakeholders in the education space. You've got the principal or business owner that are focused on certain things. You've got the educator or teacher that's focused on certain things. And you've got the parent that's focused on certain things. And you have to solve all three of those problems for anything to be useful. And so it's deeply understanding that. But again, selfishly, it was just built to solve our own problem.
And as you started to scale this to start to solve a problem for a sector as opposed to your individual problems, did you find that the problem that you were originally solving still held true, or were you having to sort of rethink that again?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it has to be thought at a scale level, but the problem for the three stakeholders is still the same. How do you increase occupancy for the service owner? How do you solve administration for the educator? And then how do you bring connection for the family? That's the simplistic version of it. Now, the challenge that comes with anything at a scale is everyone sort of solves that problem quite differently. And so software just has to plug this generic gap, and then people do everything else on top of that.
And obviously throughout this journey, you've got to see how people used your product and being able to iterate and be able to change it and so forth. Was there something that you had in your mind back in the early days that ended up being really just didn't hit the mark, or you thought this was an idea and it was so much bigger than what you had thought?
Yeah, both. There's plenty of ideas that, you know, right now sitting in your sort of room in lockdown, you think is going to change the world, and then you get it into the first customer's hands and they sort of look at you saying, what is that? But I guess that comes down to the fact that why, you know, I say change the world, but why are you building this feature, or why are you building this product? Is it because it's going to make you awesome and it's an ego driven result, or is it solving a need for a teacher or an educator or a family? And I think when you lose sight of that, that's when the customer gets those ideas and thinks, what have you done? And then those really basic, simple ideas that will get you no media attention and will go, no one will notice, customers love. And it's the ones that are super humble. Something as simple as being able to download or print your photos. You know, something as simple as that changes the life of a family who's just trying to sit there screenshotting different photos and things to send them to the grandparents who might be overseas in lockdown. So, or the ability to live stream a lesson or a book that's been read in a childcare centre to a family that may not have access to education. So it's those little things.
I imagine that. Yes, the power of grandma and grandpa putting a photo of a child on a fridge is still, it's amazing in 2020. That's still a driver for what you're doing. So there you go. In your journey, at some point you had to start raising some capital to really scale this thing. So I guess I have a couple of questions around that. So firstly, how did you find your first investors? Did you say no to some investors? How did you pick the right investor? Right? And we'll just assume that you've got the right investor, right? Like that goes without saying.
Yeah, I was just about to caveat my next statement that 1, I love Airtree. 2, I love Advent. So now that's out of the way.
Well, that was a given, of course.
No, but I mean, my only advice, and I hate giving advice because it feels like I'm still learning every single day, is you really need to understand, for some people, investment's awesome. For others, it's not going to work. And you need to deeply understand that when we hear startup, we assume, fast growth, all the rest of it. And I know me personally, my assumption was, well, we're talking about sales and revenue and customers. But growth also means, well, you're going to be doing board meetings now, and you need to grow up just as fast as your company's growing up. And so you just need to be ready for that. And there's a high expectation, and it's not for everyone. I wouldn't change it. I'd do it all again because we're here. And all those lessons and all those mistakes were huge, huge growth. Now, there's many times we should have failed, but it's just that resilience and that perseverance and that support from investors like Airtree and Advent that help you keep moving. So in short, it's not for everyone. In terms of choosing the right investors, that's tough because when you have to raise money, that's at the forefront. Not so much can I work with this problem, because you're thinking about the 60, 70, 100, how many team members you might have at that point, and knowing that, well, if I don't raise, these people are out of jobs. So choosing a partner based on if you're going to work together is really hard sometimes when you're in the heat of battle. But that's critical. You need to be able to work with people. And these people are going to be deeply involved in your business, and they should be. But you need to treat them as team members and one of the crew, and working together is going to be quite important. You need to deeply understand what you're looking for. Are you looking for someone with experience? Are you looking for someone that's going to help you achieve your sales goals? What are you looking for? So that's sort of my roundabout advice.
We'll come back to your support structures in a minute, because I think I'm really interested in that. I think lots of early stage businesses need to rethink who they go to for advice and support, but we'll come back to it in a second. I just want to stay with investors for just one moment. And feel free to like not share some details if it's too private in the journey, right? When you're out there looking for investors, how did you go about making the decision that you're going to take capital from a particular investor? Were there some that you went, look, you know what, this isn't going to work for me, it's not going to work? Or did you just literally go, right, I found the right guys up front?
Yeah, and it is really tough. I often say I wouldn't wish raising capital on my worst enemy. It's tough. It's no. We love your idea, but not yet. Come back in 12 months, and you're thinking, well, I'm either not here in 12 months or we'll be fine in 12 months. So it's really tough. And you've got to put all that personal emotion aside and really get to the heart of what you're trying to achieve. For Airtree and Advent, Airtree, both investors were super aligned with what we were trying to achieve from the vision, which is to relentlessly make education great. So they loved what we were trying to achieve. They loved the team and the culture and the values that we had built. And that was enough for me. It sounds really airy-fairy, but they deeply understood what we were trying to achieve. They'd done their research, a lot of it, and they knew what they were getting into. They spent a lot of personal time with us, and lots of conversations, and they were able to understand the business very quickly and deeply, which was important for me because I needed to be able to have conversations about the business with the people that were investing in it. So for me, that was the element. Then the other little things came in. They had the capital, they had the support, they had the networks, they had all of that. But ultimately, they deeply believed in myself and the team, and that was critical.
Fantastic. Let's go back to the point of the thread that you raised, which is around the support structures in the early stages of your business. Who were important there? What external advisors did you have? How did you ensure that your path that you were picking was reasonably the way you wanted to go?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people that help, and it's one of those realizations that when you're fighting the fight, you assume you're doing everything, and it feels like the world's on your shoulders. But ultimately, you've got your pet dog that walks in at the right time, and that at some point your dog's going to get some credit. But you've got the support of your investors, you've got the support of your team, and it sounds odd, but you really got the support of those early adopters, those customers who are the first on the journey, the first people that use your product, and just that realization that they have, in our case, disrupted their business to take a bet on us. That's really powerful. And so you can talk to them, and that's the relationship that we have still to this day with those first people that joined our platform. We can call them up, say, hey, we're thinking of this. Can we get your feedback? So those support networks are important, but they come in different ways that you may not realize at that point.
So your customers were part of that support process too?
Yeah, and when I say support, I wasn't going to them to say, hey, I need to raise money, please help. That's probably not what a customer wants to hear. But but it was also, hey, we're trying to solve this problem, and it's quite critical. Do you have any insight? And it's that ability to be able to say, well, we don't know all the answers, and we are trying to solve the problems, and we're going to make a lot of mistakes, and that's good because at least we're moving. But it's just that network and that honesty with yourself to be able to ask for help. And I say that to myself because I don't do it all the time.
You've recently merged the business, I think, with another entity. And I'm really interested in thinking about, you've now got a much bigger role across multiple businesses. What's the most exciting part about that journey for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. I mean, we started this journey 4.5 years ago, so it feels like 20 years, but it's been 4.5. But what's been exciting for me is seeing nothing grow into something. And what's exciting is now there's more people focused on the vision, people that would never had anything to do with education outside going to school themselves, now laser focused on trying to make education a little bit better. I think that gets me excited. And the more customers we can impact, the more parents, families that we can impact, it just allows us to influence education and support teachers to do what they actually signed up to do, which was teach, and remove that element of distraction, being administration. So that gets me excited every single day, that just watching this thing grow from nothing. I mean, it was nothing. And that's sort of this crazy realization every single day. And to watch the values and the culture and the team bring this thing to life, I think that is super exciting. So mergers and acquisitions, we just get more people to do that with us. And so that's exciting.
Which has a little question in my mind. You obviously founded this business 10 years ago. Did you envisage it? How many people in your team now?
I should know that, but it's 153. Yeah.
150. Well, that's close enough. And if you could have just said that, nobody would know if that's true or not. That's good. Yeah. 153 is a great number. Did you design, 10 years ago, did you think you're going to be running a business for 153 staff members?
No.
Okay.
I mean, 10 years ago, I was in the army. I was planning a career in the army. The only reason I left was to help my mum, because I didn't want to see her struggle. Not because I'm a great son or anything like that. I just wanted to help. Didn't know if I could offer any value. And so it was just sort of one of those, well, here's a decision, let's just do that. Worst case, I would have joined the army. Not that the army was a second choice, but it was just, I need to help my mum. And so there was no ambition to have anything except a 33-place childcare centre be as successful as it can be.
I think that's a regular theme with lots of successful entrepreneurs, to be honest. You're solving a problem and then the commercial comes. And I think that, especially in education, you don't wake up in the morning and go on and become a really successful person in education, right? You're there trying to solve a problem. So it's been a really inspiring story, Mark. I had the pleasure of essentially interviewing you on stage a few times over the years now, and I've heard the story many times, and it continues to resonate with me, and I have a lot of it makes a lot of sense to me. So we now sort of get to wrap up a little bit, and this is where you get to choose your own adventure, right? So in education in 2020, we get to choose our own pathway. So you get to choose the final question that you want to answer. You can answer whichever one that fits or resonates with you, and hopefully it resonates with the audience as well. So, you know, question option one, if you like, is you founded a business, you grew the business, you've sold that business. What does the next 3 years look like for you? So that's option one. Or option two, you can go with, if you can go back in time to speak to that younger Mark from 10 years ago, which is not that long ago, I know that, and, you know, if you went back and asked that guy who had an idea, no money to execute, what would you say to yourself about the journey that's to come?
Oh, wow. Two good questions.
Feel free to answer both if you want.
I mean, I can answer the second one quite quickly. I mean, what would you say to yourself, a younger version of yourself? And I think about that with my 3-year-old daughter. What's one of the most important things that she could learn? And it's really just perseverance or resilience. It feels like the world's collapsing, and you give up that day. If you just keep moving to the very next morning, then there's a high chance that you're going to solve that problem. If you're not going to solve it that day, just keep moving. It's not end of the world. You can solve anything. You may not like the solution, but you can solve it. So that's quite powerful. Like, now there's a challenge. Okay, well, here's our options. Let's choose an option and let's go down that path. If that's wrong, cool, we'll just change direction. Not a problem. So it's more of that realization that anything is solvable. You just have to it may not be 100% in your favor, which is fine.
That's a fantastic message to anyone who's building any business, whether it's a high growth startup or it's a small business or it's a private freelancing consulting practice, it doesn't matter. Mark, thank you so very much for your time today to give us a little bit of insight into the Xplor journey. And as I mentioned a moment ago, I've heard your story a number of times, and I'm really interested what the next 3 years looks like. So I'm interested. You left that question. We'll leave that one out there. You don't have to answer that one today. We'll do that at a future point in time. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to another session on Innovation Alley at EduTech 2020, a fully virtual EdTech conference.
Started at the university where I was teaching first year accounting, and essentially looking for a way to improve the performance and success rate for students.
How could we make it so that every student could be a mentor, every student could tutor somebody else? What's the technology piece missing there to make that work at scale?
Realistically, AI is such a powerful tool or mechanism that can be deployed to solve so many different problems.
I wouldn't wish raising capital on my worst enemy. It's tough. It's no. We love your idea, but not yet. Come back in 12 months.
There's been a huge acceleration in the investment in EdTech at a global level.
There is still a role for government, there is a role for large education providers, there is a role for large education systems to play in that ideation space and the innovation space.